Looking for some inspiration? You've come to the right show. Step into your divine feminine energy with me as I spill the tea on leadership and life. Hi, I'm Tracy M., your host here on Brave Girls, and I've got your back, and no mean girls are allowed. I've been called the fairy godmother of storytelling, and my gift is to unearth people's stories, share them, and make the world a better place for all of us. So sit back, relax, and listen in as we send some more positive vibes out into the universe. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to the show, Dr. Erin Watley, a very esteemed colleague, friend, academic, consultant. I'm just so happy that you've decided that you are like, yes, I can be on your podcast. So I'm so happy to have you here, Dr. Erin. So I always ask people to give a little bit of their backstory. And, you know, the one thing that stood out for me on your website was, I do this work because it's my calling. That really stood out for me. And so I want you to talk a little bit about your background and what this calling is all about, because I'm not sure everyone understands intersectionality, intercultural dialogue, cultural sensitivity, and the reviews of media, and some of the stuff that this is your purpose, right? You're stepping into your purpose. You're teaching people how to build community. You're teaching people how to work through conflict. And so just give us a little bit of your backstory and how you got to where you are. And just so that people know, you're dialing in from Budapest, Hungary, which I'm super excited for you. So just so everybody knows, Dr. Erin was my supervisor when I was an adjunct professor at McDaniel, and I just absolutely adore her. So go ahead and tell us your story, Dr. Erin.
I mean, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me, Tracy. And I guess the place to start for me is that, yes, I do feel like the kind of work that I do is my purpose, but I'm very much aware of the fact that I'm only who I am because of the people and where I come from. So even like my story is not just like me becoming, it's like I'm a product of my environment. And I think of that in all of the best ways. It relates to the work that I do with thinking about culture and using culture as a way to navigate getting better with conflict because I grew up in an area where there was a lot of cultural diversity. My parents moved my family to the Washington, D.C. area when I was about 2 years old, and we moved to Silver Spring. I went to a really small private school in Silver Spring, Maryland, and my early schooling and also my early church experiences, because I grew up in the Christian church, and they were very multicultural in a way that was not even really the norm at that point in time in the early 90s. So to be at a small private Christian school that was racially diverse, right? I don't have the kind of stories that are, I was the only Black kid in the school, right? Or I was the only Black child in the class. Like, it wasn't the majority, but I was never the only. And the same goes for the church home that I grew up in. It was a very intentionally multicultural church. And again, it was not just being a Black family in a white church. It was, there was Latino families, there were South Asian families, there were families that had direct African origins, right? Like, it was a mix. And what I noticed as I started to go through my growing up experience, and as I went out into the world, church and school took up 6 days of my week, right? At a young age. But then as I started to go out on my own, especially when I went to college, I realized, oh, most people didn't have this type of intercultural experience. And my intercultural understanding starts with race, because as a Black woman, race was the first point that was very salient for me to explore about myself and about the world. But I was like, oh, people might have lived in quote unquote diverse environments. Like, Maryland is a pretty culturally diverse state. In fact, I think Montgomery County is one of the most diverse places in the nation. But people might have lived that, but they didn't have the relationships. They didn't have the intercultural relationships in the same way with the same kind of depth that I had grown up with being normal. And so then when I went to college, I continued to explore my curiosity around culture, knowing that culture was not just something that I had had a lot of experiences about learning from other people with other different cultural or racial backgrounds, but also because I realized, or I knew that culture was such a dividing line, right? So much us versus them, so much controversy surrounding whatever the identities are. At that point, it's race, it's gender, it's sexual orientation, it's economic class. And so I was like, oh, they don't have friends who are different than they are. They haven't had long-term relationships with people who are very different than they are. And so I was like, I wanted to use culture as a starting point for how do we get along better? How do we bridge the divide? And my point of orientation is I know it's possible because that's what I've had.
Right.
It's possible
Right.
because that's what I've had. And I want more people to have an experience that is more like that. And of course, it's complex. I'm not trying to paint this utopian background story that everything was all roses, but I just had a different type of exposure than many people who I interacted with after I left high school and went into college, right? I went to University of Maryland, right? Like big, huge college, right? And then I worked for a time and I went to grad school, and that was like, oh, my experience is different. And I want a level of difference for more people, and I want to use culture to do that. So what I do now is I have committed myself fully to using culture as the entry point for learning and navigating conflict. And really, at this point, it's not even just about navigating conflict. Culture is my entry point for justice work. How do we create a more just world, right? Where the cultural identities and differences that people experience are not a limitation, they're celebrated, right? That people have equitable experiences no matter who they are, right? No matter what their identity, whatever that might be. And I've found that using popular media, I work a lot with popular media, helps people to start having those conversations in a really accessible way, and it opens the door to get into that.
Is it because popular media is, I don't want to say relatable, but understandable? Like it's a
And
tangible exam. It's access. Yeah. Like whether it's right, wrong, or indifferent, it's just something that you can say, oh, here's an example of, I don't know, an article in the Atlantic, you know what I mean? Or here's a TV show, or here's it's a tangible thing that people can experience. Is that helpful to bring people into the realities that you're trying to expose?
Absolutely. I mean, I know that I have a PhD, right? Like there are ways that my academic experience is like, oh, the ivory tower, yeah, journal articles and research, but it's not as accessible to people who don't have that experience. And really, it's not even that accessible to people who are within the academy, if you're asking me. But that's probably another conversation. But I
Yeah.
would say talking about a journal article is more cumbersome and challenging just because
Yes.
of the way that content is presented than talking about a Marvel movie, right?
Correct.
I can talk about intersectionality, or we can talk about representation through the lens of Iron Man, right?
Right.
And people will be more engaged, they'll have more to offer than if I just gave you a journal article talking about the media representation within Iron Man. Even if
Right. Right. So the work that you're doing now, like some people may not even understand the word intersectionality and what that means. Could you just kind of give us like a 101 on like how you would articulate that, just so that everybody's kind of on right playing field with what you're talking about?
Sure. Intersectionality in its most simple form is that as multiple marginalized identities exist within a person, that they create a different and more unique type of experience. So the person who branded the term intersectionality is a woman by the name of, oh shoot, her name just left my brain. I should know this. Edit around this. I'm literally working on a paper right now. Kimberly Crenshaw. Kimberly
Okay.
Kimberly Crenshaw is she coined the term in the context of law, talking about Black women. And it came up because there is a precedent for talking about racial discrimination in the workplace when she wrote her seminal piece in 91, I believe. There's a legal precedent about racial discrimination, and there was
Mm-hmm.
a precedent about gender discrimination, so discrimination against women. But her argument was that Black women have a specific experience that cannot be classified just as racial or just as being gendered. And so she then coined this term intersectionality, which has taken on many different forms since she started using it. I won't get too in the weeds about that, but the main point is that as these
That's good
ideas,
history. Yeah, that's good history.
yeah, as they
And
pile on each
background.
other, it creates a new thing. And I would say, I think you also mentioned before intercultural, which intercultural then is the different identities that we experience within ourselves, and that there are multiple versions of those as well. And so, as you look through all of these different lenses, right, like
Right.
being from the suburbs, being a Black woman, right? Being somebody who is Christian, being somebody who comes from a upper middle class upbringing. All of
Right.
those things are cultural elements that intersect with each other. But to take an intercultural perspective means that you are looking at a group at the same time, or you're looking at the interplay between different identities at the same time, which I think is
Got it.
different than people who maybe focus more exclusively on race or more exclusively on gender or
Correct.
education. Is that we're really talking about a different kind, we're talking about a more universal mechanism related to the human experience that really just manifests itself as cultural differences and categories, and we want to get to the what's underneath that.
That totally makes sense. That totally makes sense. So, um, talk about why you think community building is so important in this having a more a more just world, like, because that seems to also kind of flow through like all the stuff I've read about you, that you have. It just came out to me that you have this very strong belief in the importance of community building and how to go about it in a different way, if that makes sense.
Yes. It's the same in that my exposure to a multicultural environment came from my upbringing. My exposure to strong community comes from my upbringing. Even though my parents moved here from Denver, Colorado, they created a community for me and my family uh, that is still a core community that they are connected to today, right? And being able to connect with people and see people and have relationships with people over long periods of time. Not that every community has to last for decades, but to have that experience means that you see and know people through many different stages of their lives, right? You see them and understand them as people. And I think one thing that absolutely is lacking with how we are running our world,
Hmm.
big picture, is we do not prioritize or invest in connection with other human beings that lasts, right? That is not just transactional, that is because you care for somebody, right? Like you show up for people and you might not agree all the time, but you have ways to maybe have an argument and then repair and then like you keep
Right.
moving and like that keeps happening over and over and over again. It's a microcosm of my own even immediate family. That we need more of that, right? We need people to be more human. And part of what being more human is to be more connected to other people. And there's tons of research. I don't even have to repeat it, talking about the disconnect of modern times, right? And the ways that we are separated from one another. And so on a fundamental level, I think that community building is a approachable way to be thinking about how to create more justice and repair. If you're thinking about something as this is a group that I'm not familiar with and they're just looking for like rights or access or something that I don't agree with, is different than these are people who
Correct.
I know who are humanized and they are looking for experiences that are very similar to experiences that I recognize, right? And the more we're able to do that, even with individuals who we don't all have the same things in common, the more we'll actually have stronger and better functioning communities. And this is true. Community is a family, community is a relationship with a partner, community is a school, it's an institution, it's a government, right? Like it's a country.
Yeah.
The size and the scale changes, but the need for connection and community remains and remains. The need remains, and the evidence that those are not meeting a need, they're not meeting the need.
Right.
Is
Right. Yeah, so I worked for somebody once and I loved his saying. He said, "You can disagree without being disagreeable." And I think that's where your work kind of comes into play, right? Because um, it's that human connectedness and it's being able to have that constructive dialogue that you can agree to disagree, but without being disagreeable. And that's where it goes back to the relationship, right? And treating the person as a human, right? And
I
their
mean,
perspective is their perspective based on their experiences, right? And so that's why as you build these communities, I would imagine that's where you lean in is to teach people those soft skills, right? Of how to have those conversations, how to engage in a meaningful way that is productive.
I mean, yes, that's true. And that's a part. And I think it's, for me, it's also really important to say that the justice element remains. So it's not, I need to be friends with somebody who is a KKK member, right?
Correct.
I don't want to have a agree to disagree moment with somebody
Right.
who, you know, wants to terrorize my community, for example. And so that is not, civility is not the only point, right?
Correct.
Restoration,
Correct.
restoration and repair, and actually substantial increase in justice is what I hope it leads to. Although I can't always
Correct.
say that. I
Hmm.
can't always say that, but that's the point. The point
Hmm.
is I hope that as we learn to relate and connect and seeing each other as more human, that we don't have the need to control so many elements of somebody else's life, right?
I
That
think that's really well said. I
yeah.
think that's really well said. Yeah. And so, you know, what are some of the ways that you believe will are effective restoration and repair, like methods, I guess, or approaches, or like what have you seen work? And I know we have a long way to go. Like we have
I
a
know.
really right. So like and I also know that like you're not rose-colored glasses that we're going to get to your target state in our
Right.
lifetime, but like
Yeah,
can we make
that's
incremental
vision.
yeah, like can we make incremental progress, right? And can we do things in terms of like, I feel like sometimes people just aren't like, they don't have a level of consciousness or self-awareness. And I think that's a big part of the contributing factor. Like they don't realize the privilege that they have, or they don't realize, you know, where their come from is so different from somebody else's come from, and they don't take the time to get to know somebody else's come from. If that's kind of been my observation.
I mean, you're spot on. I'm teaching actually right now in Budapest for the first time. I'm teaching a new class that I'm developing. Well, I am developing it as we go, but
As you go, right? That's how
the
we
new,
build that. We build the plane as we fly
exactly,
it. That's what you do when
exactly.
you're a professor.
I don't want to sound like I'm just like showing up. Like I have a plan. There is a
Oh,
syllabus.
totally. Yeah, totally.
But it's called Communication for Community Building. And what we start with is self-reflection. We start with thinking about our own presence, right? We start with how we experience perhaps even conflict in our own literal bodies. Like we do embodiment exercises to bring awareness to the fact that we are having like physical responses, right, to what's
Correct.
happening around us and others. And those physical responses influence what comes out of our mouth, right? What we
Absolutely.
think in our
Absolutely.
mind, how we align with others, or even just our body language, right? And so, like, you have to check in with yourself. And I think that many of us, if we're talking like
The
the
world.
us, right, the world, are rarely asked to really do that, to really be reflective of how they are taking information in, right? Like that's the decline of critical thinking, but then also the application of what they're exposed to connected to their action or lack of action. Because I think lack
Correct.
of action is also a huge thing these days with people being so afraid of the wrong thing or being canceled or causing some sort of offense that they don't do anything. They don't even
Correct.
try to reach out to somebody or to make a connection or to learn about a group or an experience that they are unfamiliar with. And so that keeps them from being able to even access a different way of thinking, doing, living your life. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, no, I think that's a big part of it. And like in my executive coaching, like my number one goal is always to make the person become more self-aware, right? So that they can see sort of their limitations and focus like on a growth mindset where there's always something to be learned. There's always some like, we're sort of always learning and growing and continuously improving. And if not, we're dying, right? And so but what I find is, that unless the person is really into personal growth and development, a lot of times they don't go down. Like I'm just like a junkie seeker, right? That I'm all about like personal growth and development, and I always have been. But it's like seeing the benefit of the investment of doing that to then become a better human in the world, right?
Right.
Because I too am a connector. I too want to have a more just world. I see people, I see the value in building relationships over time and being there and really serving other people in whatever capacity that I'm in, whether it's being a professor for students or it's being in the workforce and adding value to the client or other coworkers and, sort of that whole servant leadership. But it's sort of like we still have so much waking up of people to
Yes.
go, and that's very much, I can see that's very much your calling, right? Like you're waking people up. You're like, hello, 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 hello,
Yes.
right? And so that's where that's the lane that you kind of travel in because of your background, because of your academic training, because of your, you know, all of your accomplishments as a professor, at and let's talk about a little bit about Budapest, and like that is like a
Okay.
huge
Sure.
honor that you were selected to do that. How is that going for you? And maybe you can just talk a little bit about, that experience for you.
Yeah, so I'm 6 weeks in now. Actually, as of yesterday, I think was my 6 week mark. And, so far, so good. To me, right now, it's really a blessing. Not in
Mhm.
that, I mean, yeah, I'm really privileged to have been selected at our school. once a year, a professor is picked who applied, right, to come over to Budapest and to teach for a semester. And the timing of my being here could not be more aligned, right?
Hmm.
Because exactly of because of the turmoil that's happening at home and the political climate, I know Budapest has its own issues, right? Uh but because I'm an outsider, I'm not as connected to it as I am with like the politics and the goings on back in the United States. And so I'm
Correct.
very much in a little bit of a bubble where I can be a little bit removed from that. And so that has actually helped this class that I'm teaching and my
Hmm.
experience overall. I feel a little bit more present. And it's probably also because I have less responsibility here than what I have when I'm back home in the States.
Hmm. In terms of teaching load and like,
I have one less class for my teaching load. When I'm in the States, I'm the chair of the department. I'm not the chair of
right,
the department right now. Uh, I am here on my own, right? So
right,
it's just me. I'm not, I am married and I miss my husband, but also, running a household and the day to
right.
day with other people it's another it's
Dimension,
it's another dimension of like mental
the load. Yeah,
weight, mental load, exactly. And so my mental load is the lowest I think has ever been in my adult life. And because of that, I am like just enjoying the day, right? I was running
correct.
late. I was running late because my one of the assignments for my community building class is I require all the students to have a 30 to 45-minute one-on-one conversation with me, and they're in charge of what we talk about, right? And the point of that being just to get to know your professor in a different light, and they pick the location. It could be in my office, but today somebody wanted to meet at a cafe, and have coffee, and like it's just a really casual thing. So like things like that, I don't think I would have had the bandwidth to manage uh during my normal day to day back in Maryland on the main campus. So being here right now, while the general narrative is like the world is crazy and things feel like they're
Right,
falling apart. Yes, because those things actually really affect me, right? The nature of my work, I've already
correct.
lost a consulting contract with the Department of Ed because of this,
Right.
I get it, but also at this moment of time immediately, I feel like I'm being restored by being here and I'm able to do my work better, and it gives me a sense of like, well, this is how I could prepare this for when I go back. Like it gives me more energy for doing when I go back, which is exactly what I'll need when I get back to keep picking up and to continue with this work because I have no desire, no inclination, no signs of tamping down. I'm just going to keep probably turning things.
Yeah, it definitely sounds like your cup is being filled. And I would also say that, I did a study abroad when I was at college and I went to London, and when I came back, I was a different person. I had a much more global view of the world. And so like all the things that are happening just organically for you, I'm sure the payback is going to come 10 years down the road, right? Because of this experience, it's all part of your like what is supposed to happen in the life of Dr. Erin Watley, right? Like this is a key like flashpoint to inform and restore you so that you're going to come back a different person. I would also ask, are the students, is it a mix of Americans and Europeans, or what is the profile of the students there on
At
campus?
the college, it's a mix. It's majority European and
Hmm.
international students.
Okay.
There are some students who come from the Maryland campus for a semester as their study abroad, but
Right.
only one of those students is in my class this
Okay.
semester. Most of the students I have are students who are taking classes full time here at McDaniel Europe,
Hmm.
and there's maybe I think I have maybe five American students between two classes, and the rest
Hmm.
are the international group.
Mm-hmm. And are you able to travel like outside your academic work? Does the schedule allow that you can travel throughout Europe as part of the semester? Like
It does
where you don't
allow,
have, yeah, where you don't have teaching requirements that you don't have to physically be on campus in Budapest?
yeah, it does allow. That's the other thing. My schedule, I'm only teaching 2 days a week. And next week, I'm actually hopping on a study abroad trip to Eastern Hungary. And then a little bit later, I'm going to hop on another trip to Vienna. And then I might make a personal trip to one or two other places. So there's absolutely time and availability to travel around a little bit.
You absolutely deserve it. You absolutely deserve it for all the work that you've done on campus in Maryland. And, I'm so happy that the college recognized your brilliance and was able to give you this opportunity, Dr. Erin, because I think that you're just going to come back bigger, bolder, brighter, as a result. So they're pouring into you just like you've already poured in for what, 10 years, 11 years. I mean, you've been there a
Yeah,
while.
this is my this end of my I'm wrapping up my ninth year. So when I start in the
Yeah.
fall, I'll be 10. Ooh,
Yeah.
yeah,
Woo.
yeah.
Wow.
I know.
Wow.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I just, I like that you're a disruptor. I love that about you.
I'm a quiet disruptor, right? There's
Absolutely.
a,
Absolutely. You're in the background doing that disrupting.
yeah. One of my academic or philosophical mentors is a woman by the name of Trisha Hersey, who
Yeah. Speak about that because yeah,
represents,
right.
and she calls herself a revolution wrapped in softness.
Hmm.
And I love that expression, right? Because like, yes, they're the way I see the world and like I want to disrupt and I know that what I offer students and people that I talk with is at its core pretty disruptive. But the way that I go about it traditionally is not the like beat people over the head. It's not the like listen to me, you have to agree with me. In fact, I tell people like please don't agree with me. Like let's talk about what that difference actually is so we can talk about
Right.
it. But like a revolution wrapped in softness very much feels right for how I think about going about the work that I do, even right. And like I think that sometimes I think, and recently I had a friend tell me that I kind of lull people in, right? And then once they get close and they're like, oh yeah, like, Erin or Dr. Watley, like they think they have me figured out, then it's like, boom, I start challenging, right? I start like,
Yes.
well, what about this? And like, have you seen this? Or what do you think about this thing? Or like, I'll just plant little seeds. And I've noticed that over time, especially at my time in McDaniel, so often students and even faculty and staff will come up to me and they'll say, you said this one thing to me one time, and like I thought about it and like it just stuck with me. And it really like it planted something deep that I didn't recognize, but it caused a little shift, right? And I love those moments when they make their way back to me because it's like, yeah, that's what I think I am best equipped for. I'm not the blowhard. I'm not
Right. Right.
the big, I don't need to be the face of anything. I just want to be able to keep promoting being more human for
Yeah.
more people and calling attention to the fact that so many of the ways that we talk about being more human or like doing life is actually counter to that, right? If yeah, I can.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think it goes back to your curiosity, right? That led you down sort of this where you are today. You have a lot of curiosity. And so, you know, sort of challenging people with the like, have you thought about this and what about that? And then people going away. Sometimes people just need more processing time, like they can't react in the moment. So Yeah, so after you told me about The Rest is Resistance, I bought the book and I read it and I was like, oh my God. Yeah, yeah. And I know that like her primary audience was African American women, women of color. Like that's, and like I love everything she said. And I love that you had introduced Rest Wednesdays and the NAP ministry into sort of the curriculum and everything. And she was so ahead of her time because now everybody's talking about rest and recovery
Yeah.
and burnout and
Yeah.
post pandemic and all that. But like, I love that book. Like, if I could interview her on my podcast, I would love to because I've been
Oh,
following her and I've
yes.
been like looking at like just what she puts on threads. And I was like, oh, yeah, girl. Like, right on. Yup. You know what I mean? Like, I even am able to, like, I get what she's trying to say.
Right. Right. And I appreciate you saying that also because I admire the fact that while her perspective is clearly talking about the experiences of Black people and especially Black women in the United States, but the point is that the message itself is from anyone. And what I
I
see
would
her
agree.
as very like it's a very subversive thing is that it's inviting people who don't have that identity to learn from somebody who is forefronting that identity in what it is that they are
Yeah,
sharing. And that's what people of color do all the time, right? We have to learn like from a generalized white, like heteronormative perspective
right.
constantly. Like it doesn't get named that way. It just gets looked at as being like normal or like this is the standard, right? It's not talked about through the lens of whiteness, but what it actually is that it's white and it's it's heteronormative, it's patriarchal, all those sorts of things. And it's
Hmm.
we have to find meaning from information being conveyed in that way. And it's the reverse with Trisha Heresy and a lot of women doing Black womanist or feminist type work is we're going to talk from this perspective and you have a lot to learn from this perspective, right? This perspective
Absolutely.
is
Absolutely.
actually the one that is more just intentionally, right? Is more justly practiced and is more open and from the foundation built for and welcoming to anybody, right? But we're telling that story and we're telling that narrative through the lens of Black women or Black people because we need it, right? Like, and we need to
Yes,
say how these systems have been built on the backs of exploiting those individuals
absolutely.
to get where it's at, right? The whole point of restless resistance is like capitalist society is killing us and we can't get around that. And the capitalism of the United States is built on enslavement of Black people. So Black people deserve to get reparations via rest in a sense. But then also, everybody needs to rest more because
Correct.
you can't keep sustaining our
Correct.
system at the rate that it's going. Nobody should be working the way they are. It shouldn't be necessary for people to have one job and a side gig and like another thing.
Correct.
Nobody should be doing that, right? So like everybody do less, do less,
Correct.
and see how the system responds, right?
Correct. No, it's brilliant. And,
I get
so
really
much.
passionate. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, like, I grew up in the 70s, right? And I, there are so many stories that were not exposed in history class about a number of things. And like now there's all these documentaries. I watch every single one of them because I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, that would have been nice to know in fifth grade. That would have been nice to know in eighth grade.
Mhm.
Like, oh, well, why was that suppressed? Why was that oppressed? Why was that not, inclusive? And so like I sat on the plane, I went to Charleston and I sat on the plane next to this woman. She was 80 some years old. She was from the county that I grew up in. And I had gone to this particular elementary school. Well, she was the one who desegregated this school because it was all the African American students of the county, because it was pretty rural and farm like, they all went to this school, and so it was called something colored school or whatever. And it was first grade till 12th grade, and the whole county, that's where they went. And then I guess it was her maybe like junior or senior year, they desegregated, and because of Brown versus whatever, and so she was one of the very first people that integrated the schools in our county. It was not that long ago. And I was like, Oh my God. Oh my God. Oh my God. And it's just the stories that she told me on the plane ride were phenomenal. And I was just like, I'm like, that was what, like a generation ago? Like it was not even that far removed, and we were talking about the building and she was telling me about things that she did when she was in that school. And just because the building hadn't changed, right? They just converted it to an elementary school when they desegregated. But I was thinking, wow, that like you hear about that and you think, oh, it's like 500 years ago. And
Right.
it's like, no, it's like, it's not that long ago.
Right. Still
And
alive. Yes.
and it's still alive and kicking, right? And so like I feel like I have a responsibility to educate myself on so many
Mhm.
things and on so many fronts because I feel like growing up, that information just wasn't shared. And so but I think I'm kind of unusual because I don't think a lot of people want, and that's where it goes back to that self-awareness and that self-reflection and that level of consciousness and trying to become more conscious about like who I am in my dimensions of, you know, diversity,
Yes.
right? And being like, okay, and it's that come from. I know where I come from, but I want to know where you come from. And I want to know what your experiences were so that then I can be a better human,
Yeah,
right? In the
absolutely. I mean,
world. Yeah.
yeah, from an intercultural perspective, I teach media classes also. I'm constantly asking, and this is not just me, like this is a practice, but you have to take it upon yourself to educate
Completely.
yourself
Completely.
about experiences or identities that are not yours, especially for your dominant identities, right? So
Yeah.
for me, because I grew up in a Black household, and I learned probably more stories about Blackness and Black history from the home than I did in the educational system. But
Correct.
for me, like, that doesn't mean that I knew everything, right? I had so much to learn about queer history and queer identity, right? As somebody who is heterosexual, right? I had no sense of it. And growing up in a Christian household, I didn't know anything about queer history. Like, those
Right.
stories are also buried, right? And so, like,
Completely.
we have to look to the areas where we don't have to actually usually think about that identity. So I don't usually have to think about my straightness, right? It wasn't a problem for me to get married. Like, me and my husband walking down the street is not an automatic threat, right? Because we both,
Correct.
he looks like a man, I look like a woman. Like, it doesn't cause a problem. And so in
Correct.
those areas where you don't have to think about your identity, that's actually the area where you are tasked with learning about those who are marginalized in that particular area, because uh, it's the job of the dominant group to dismantle the phobia in that area, right? So
Absolutely.
it's actually straight people who are responsible for dismantling homophobia, right? Like,
Absolutely.
it's not for queer people, right? It's us. We're the ones who maintain it. Okay, so
Correct.
like, it's I probably have like a meme about this, right? It's on white people, right, to work on racism. Like, we can't tell you, right, how to destruct this thing that you, again, not you
Creative. Yeah.
directly,
Yeah.
but
But
like,
I know. Yeah.
created, right? It's on men to work on patriarchy, right? Like,
Correct.
we can tell, we just want to live, right? Women just want to live.
Correct. Correct. Well, yeah, where I work, they have a lot of these employee resource groups, and I joined the Latinx one, I joined the Pride one, I joined the Women of Color. Like I joined all the ones that I am not. Because
Mhm.
I wanted to know how to be an ally, and I wanted, and so I go to their events. I read all the material about how to be a good ally. I read, and I hear their stories of the just, just the horrible things that have happened to them, that are deeply deeply buried and traumatizing. And that's where my come from is, okay, like I need to understand, like, so that then, but I don't want to make the decision on what I'm supposed to do. I want
Right.
your advice, right? Because I want, from your perspective, what is going to be the most beneficial to you for me to do, right? As a good ally, as a good, like, yes, there's an educational component, but then I want to take direction from that different type of person, if that
Right.
makes sense.
Makes
Because
sense.
I'm going to probably do the wrong thing, right? Just because of my bias, my
Yeah,
unconscious
absolutely.
bias of who
Absolutely.
I am and how I've, experienced the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think that that is a good place to start, right? In terms of checking in and learning about needs of allyship and of that nature. But, I'm also becoming a strong believer. I don't know if this was always how I approached it, but as I've gotten older and probably like done more of this type of work, is that I also know that I have to talk about this with people who are not in the marginalized group, right? Like the bigger
Ab-
work for me,
Absolutely.
the bigger work for me more so has been how do I make sure that like queer people aren't being talked down about or marginalized in a room that I'm in that probably doesn't have any other queer people in it, right? That's then where it becomes as an ally, right? My job, responsibility to figure out how do I handle this in this space because I I have knowledge about that space that
Yeah.
maybe a queer person wouldn't have otherwise. And so that's the hardest part actually. Talking to your own group, they call it betraying, like it's like betraying your identity. Like it's used in racial discussion of like race relations a lot. Like you have to betray your whiteness is sort of the fact. Like
Absolutely.
you then become
Absolutely.
an unsafe white person, right? Like I have to become an unsafe straight person, right? Like for
Correct.
homophobic stuff. And whatever identity, ableism,
Yes. Well,
all
it's funny because one of the things that you said that I wrote down was and it's almost like when I think about you, I think of the bridge. You're the bridge. You're bridging the divide, right? And
Mhm.
that's kind of who you are showing up in the world is that bridge, right? So my final question for you, Dr. Erin Watley, is what is the bravest thing that you've ever done, and what would you say about that brave thing that you did and what you learned from it?
The bravest thing I've ever done.
Yeah, and I know you've done many brave things.
Does it need to be related to
It can
the
be anything.
work?
No, it
Okay.
can be anything in your life.
The bravest thing that I ever did was marry my husband.
And why was that?
Uh, it's probably also tied to my work because my husband, in many ways, represented a cultural shift and difference that my family hadn't yet interacted with, right? Like he was from a different country, he had a different way of seeing the world. His experiences were very different than mine, right? When I talk about I came up in this like multicultural environment and I had this like really solid family community, he didn't necessarily have those same things growing up, and it made for a lot of cultural clashes
Hmm.
within bringing our
Your
two worlds
partnership. Yeah.
together in a way that was difficult, right? Like that was the biggest challenge because I had to decide to align myself with my partner, right?
Hmm.
Or
Yep.
align myself with my partner even when people who knew me my whole life, right? I didn't get married until I was 33. Um, People who knew me my whole life were like, we don't get it, right? Or we don't quite understand. And so for me, coming from a family and a community that was so close knit, and then
Hmm.
saying, I'm about to do this thing that you don't really understand, but I'm really confident in this decision. To me, that was a moment of like, to me that was a moment of bravery, and in many ways I know we're wrapping up, but in many ways it became a catalyst for me facing more confidently the type of work that I do now, because it was like, well, I did this and I've seen my
Yeah.
family move through and navigate, and it's a much more harmonious interaction overall now that we're 7 years in. But uh those first couple of steps were really, really hard for me. Really, really hard for me. But moving through it, and I guess being the bridge, like you just mentioned, I've used that metaphor a lot in my own personal journaling. So I appreciate that you also brought
I
that.
think you need to write your memoir. Needs to be Bridge the Divide. That needs to be a book. That's a book title for you. It absolutely is.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah.
how I became the bridge
Yeah.
to bridge across, because that is sort of like your soul's purpose, like why you're here,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And building on all of your backstory to get you to where you are today, and to, you know, go all the way to the top of academia with your, I mean, I read your CV and I was like, oh my God, this girl is so published and so accomplished and so, like, I mean, you just all that in a bag of chips. You really are. And I know that, you know, you're blushing over there, but you know,
Hey.
I just really appreciate my friendship with you. I appreciate, you know, all my conversations with you. I think you're a wonderful human being. I think that I too want a more just world. And I'm like on a journey in my mind of just learning from people like you, and just like you drop gems of wisdom and you don't even realize it. And like I walk away and I'm like, okay, I need to explore that a little more. Or, I need to get that book. Like, I love, like, you know, you always tell me about different books that you're reading, and I like immediately go on Amazon and get them,
Yeah.
because, and then it's like they might sit there for a while, but then I do pick them up and I do read them. And
Yeah. They
I
find
do
different
feel like
times.
this is part of my journey to educate myself on how can I become a better human, and how can
Mhm.
I, because I believe we're all interconnected, and I believe
Yes.
it that
Me
that
too.
you know, a lot of people don't realize how interconnected we really are, and how our actions and beliefs and behaviors, how it impacts others. And you know, I like to see, like, when somebody's like the pebble that goes in and it's like got this ripple effect in the
Yeah.
positive way. And you know, I think that we're all kind of like these spiritual warriors out here trying to like do the work. And we all kind of have our missions. I feel like mine is to write and to speak and to give voice, to not only what I am here to say, but what my, you know, sort of inner circle is saying too, right? And who I'm listening to. If I can inspire other people to wake up and to become more conscious, that really gets me pumped up, right? Because I'm just like, come on, people, like it could be so much better. And like, you know, we
Yes.
self-inflict
Can.
so
Can.
much. And um, you know, I do believe it'll get worse before it gets better, but you know, keeping your sanity and learning how to regulate your nervous system, all those things we're not taught. We're not taught how to deal with our trauma. We're not taught how to regulate, you know, our nervous system. Like, and when you really study human psychology, and when people go into fight, flight, or fawn, or freeze, you know, it's like those are all patterns that we learn like in the first 7 years of our life, you know. And some of us have big T trauma, some of us have little T trauma, but we're not really educated on how to do that. I think that's why there's sort of this rise of meditation and yoga and body somatics and all those types of things, because I think more people are more open to, hey, I got to deal with this. Like, I can't numb myself with drugs and alcohol or shopping or gambling or food or whatever the addiction is, right? Um, and so I think, you know, as more people get more, you know, sober and all the things, right? You can live the wildest like life beyond your dreams when you kind of clear that up, or you at least learn coping mechanisms that are productive.
Yes. 100%. The
So I'm glad you're doing that in this class, right? Like, because that's the foundation. You got to start there. You got to start with yourself, and you've got to really, really, really go deep on yourself, and then you can go out and serve the world, you know?
Right. Correct. The constant back and forth. Like you have to start there because you are the only tool or instrument, right, that you have any kind of control over some of the time, right? Like
Correct.
so much
Correct.
of the conversation is like, well, how do I make them, like I teach these conflict classes, culture classes. I just need to know how to make somebody respond in this way. Or just like, how do you, and I was like, the only thing you actually have control over is yourself. So we have to start there. You have to start there, and then things develop out from that. That's very much
Absolutely.
my story. I know we're at the end, but like my ability to be able to talk about this, and I do feel like it's growing, like my voice, I guess, is growing,
Hmm.
and the strength of it, my familiarity with it. That's all the result of internal work that I've been doing for longer than
Decades.
I've been able to speak about it.
Yeah, decades,
Yeah,
decades.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to put all your links in the show notes, and there'll
fantastic.
be a yeah, and there'll be a transcript. I'm super excited that you're getting the Budapest experience, and I just wish you the best of luck this semester. I love what you're creating because you can bring it back to the U.S., right, and teach it on the campus and here in
Yep,
Maryland.
it'll be taught in the fall.
Yeah, yeah, it'll probably be the most popular class, right? So, yeah, so thank you very much. I hope you have a great evening, and I hope you just continue to enjoy your European experience. And, you're just such a great influence in the world with, sort of these, you know, people who are coming of age, right, into adulthood, right? And you're hitting them at a crucial time in their life with this information that they probably have never had, but it'll shape them into who they can go and be a global citizen, right? Because that's a big part of the liberal arts education is it's about becoming this really, awesome global citizen in the world, and really focused on humanity. So thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you for having me, Tracy. It's always a pleasure talking.
Thanks for listening to today's episode of Brave Girls with Tracy M. I hope you found a gem or two that will motivate you to change your mindset, pursue your dreams, and fulfill your soul's purpose. I believe that we can go farther and faster when we connect in the spirit of positivity and understand how we individually can serve humanity. The world needs more love, so keep shining, ladies. I can be found on my corner of the interwebs at tracym.com, and I'd love to connect on social. Just Google me and my SEO will tell you more about what I'm up to as I step into my purpose as a storyteller. I love you, brave girls. Now it's time for you to step up your game and become the best possible version of you. I believe in you, and you've got this.